Slave shelters from a storm in the smokehouse, only to find the master's wife waiting for him. In a world where power and vulnerability collide, Elijah's desperate search for refuge leads him to an encounter that could change everything. As the storm outside rages, tensions rise within the smokehouse, igniting a connection that defies their societal roles. Get ready to witness a moment of reckoning that will challenge everything they thought they knew about freedom and love. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a haunting glow over the sprawling plantation. Fields of cotton stretched as far as the eye could see, their white bowls stained with the blood and sweat of those forced to harvest them. Elijah, a weary slave whose 30 years had felt like 100, felt the air thicken with tension as dark clouds rolled in, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. His shoulders ached from the day's labor, his hands calloused beyond recognition, a physical reminder of his stolen freedom. He was driven by one thought: shelter. The overseer had worked them well past reason today, pushing them until their bodies threatened to collapse. Now, with the storm approaching, Elijah knew he needed to find refuge quickly. The plantation house was too far, and the slave quarters offered little protection against the elements. But the smokehouse, solid, sturdy, and mercifully close, beckoned to him like a sanctuary. But little did he know, the storm that awaited him inside would be far more turbulent than the one brewing overhead. As the first drops of rain began to pelt the ground, he quickened his pace, wincing as his worn boots slipped in the forming mud. His mind raced with visions of freedom and the shackles that bound him, dreams that kept him alive during the darkest nights. Each raindrop felt like a reminder of his struggles, the weight of oppression pressing down on him like the storm clouds above. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating his determined face for a brief, electric moment. The wind howled through the trees, bending them to its will much like the master bent his slaves to his. Elijah pulled his tattered shirt tighter around his broad shoulders, offering little protection against the elements that seemed determined to break him. The smokehouse loomed ahead, its wooden structure a promise of temporary respite. He could already smell the lingering scent of cured meats and hickory smoke, a bitter reminder of luxuries prepared by his hands but never meant for his table. But when he finally pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest against the wind, he was met with an unexpected sight. Clara, the master's wife, her expression a mix of surprise and something else, something that looked dangerously like longing. Her pale blue dress contrasted sharply with the dimness of the smokehouse, making her appear almost ghostly in the fading light. Her presence sent a shockwave through him, igniting a fire of possibility. Amidst the storm, she wasn't supposed to be here. This was his refuge, his moment of escape. Now it had become something else entirely. Their eyes locked in the semi-darkness, neither speaking as the rain began to drum harder on the roof above. Clara's hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture of uncertainty that revealed more vulnerability than she'd likely intended. Elijah remained frozen at the threshold, 1 foot inside, 1 foot out, caught between retreat and advance, between safety and danger. What Elijah didn't know was that this encounter would unleash a tempest of emotions, forcing them both to confront the chains that bound them, chains that went far beyond the physical. Clara had her own prisons, gilded though they might be, and her eyes revealed a desperation that matched his own. The air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities, dangerous and intoxicating. "I didn't expect anyone to be here," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. This wasn't just about seeking shelter anymore. It was about two souls colliding when they least expected it, when they were most vulnerable. And as the door closed behind him, sealing them both inside with a decisive thud, the real storm was only beginning to brew. The thunder outside was nothing compared to the beating of their hearts, the lightning less dangerous than the spark that had ignited between them. What would happen in this smokehouse, away from prying eyes and the strict boundaries that governed their lives, would change everything. The storm had only just begun. Inside the smokehouse, the air crackled with intensity. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding as she faced Elijah, a man whose very existence challenged her world. The hanging meats cast long shadows across her face, highlighting the flush that had risen to her cheeks. Dried herbs dangled from the rafters, releasing their earthy scent into the confined space. The smokehouse, normally a place of preservation and patience, had transformed into a crucible of forbidden possibility. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, but her voice trembled with curiosity rather than fear. Her fingers clutched at the fabric of her dress, knuckles white with tension, the expensive silk crumpling beneath her grip. Elijah, sensing the charged atmosphere, remained by the door, his broad shoulders blocking the exit, though whether he was preventing her escape or his own, neither could say. Rainwater dripped from his clothes, forming a small puddle at his feet. The scars on his forearms, reminders of the overseer's cruelty, seemed to burn under her gaze. "I needed to escape the storm," he replied, his deep voice resonating in the confined space. But as he spoke, he felt the weight of his own reality pressing against him, the walls of the smokehouse closing in like a vice. Being alone with the master's wife could mean death if discovered, yet he couldn't bring himself to leave. The risk was immense, but something in her eyes held him captive more effectively than any chain ever had. The storm outside roared with fury, rattling the wooden structure and sending a fine mist of rain through the cracks. The wind howled like a wounded animal, matching the turmoil in their hearts. A flash of lightning illuminated Clara's face, revealing the loneliness that haunted her eyes that had witnessed too much cruelty at the hands of her husband. The brief illumination exposed the fading bruise near her temple, poorly concealed with powder. "He doesn't see me," she confessed suddenly, her voice breaking. "I'm just a shadow in his world, a possession to be displayed and then forgotten." The admission hung in the air between them, dangerous and intimate. Her wedding ring caught the dim light, a golden shackle that matched nothing of the love such symbols were meant to represent. In that moment, the power dynamics shifted. Elijah saw not just the master's wife, but a woman trapped, her vulnerability laid bare. Her golden hair had come partially undone from its careful arrangement, a few strands clinging to her damp neck. The perfection she was forced to maintain daily had begun to crack, revealing something far more human beneath. The carefully constructed facade of the plantation mistress was dissolving before his eyes, washing away like watercolor in the rain. "Sometimes," he found himself saying, "the most gilded cages are still cages." The words came from a place of truth he rarely revealed, a philosophy developed during countless nights staring at the stars through the cracks in the slave quarters roof. Clara's eyes widened at his words, surprised by his eloquence and the truth that cut straight to her core. She took a step toward him, the floorboards creaking beneath her delicate shoes. The sound seemed to echo the risk they were taking. One wrong move, one misplaced step, and everything could collapse. "You understand," she breathed, not a question, but a revelation. "All these years surrounded by people, and you're the first to truly see." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached up to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a gesture so human, so vulnerable that it made Elijah forget, for just a moment, the vast gulf between their stations. But this was just the beginning of a dangerous game, one where emotions could lead to devastating consequences. Elijah knew he should maintain his distance, keep his eyes lowered, speak only when spoken to, all the rules beaten into him since childhood. The scars on his back seemed to throb with the memory of punishment, a physical reminder of what happened to those who forgot their place. Yet something in Clara's gaze made those rules seem suddenly meaningless, like chains ready to be broken. The air between them seemed to vibrate with possibility, with words unspoken but understood. As they spoke, the tension thickened, and the air grew charged with unspoken desires. Clara leaned closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender in her hair, see the fine lines around her eyes that spoke of sorrows carefully hidden from the world. The smokehouse, with its hanging meats and herbs, became an unlikely confessional, a space outside the rigid hierarchies that governed their existence. Their worlds began to intertwine in ways neither had imagined possible. "What would it be like to be free?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with the weight of her unfulfilled dreams. The question seemed to fill the entire space, bouncing off the walls and returning to them charged with even more meaning. The question struck him like a physical blow. Freedom, the word he dared not even think too loudly for fear it might be snatched away like everything else. He had heard whispers of the Underground Railroad, of slaves who had escaped to the north, but such stories seemed like distant fairy tales compared to the harsh reality of plantation life. "Freedom isn't just the absence of chains," he found himself saying, words flowing from some deep well within him. "It's the ability to choose your own path, to wake up and decide your own fate." As he spoke, he realized he was revealing thoughts that could get him killed, thoughts he had carefully guarded for years, sharing them only in hushed conversations with trusted friends in the dead of night. A particularly violent gust of wind slammed against the smokehouse, making them both jump. The entire structure seemed to groan under the assault as if the very elements were protesting their forbidden conversation. Clara instinctively reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm, a touch so forbidden, so dangerous, that both froze at the contact. The simple gesture sent electricity coursing through them, bridging worlds that were never meant to meet. Her fingers, soft and unmarked by labor, against his skin, weathered and calloused from years of toil. The contrast could not have been more stark, yet the connection could not have been more profound. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, though she made no move to leave. Her eyes, a deep blue like the ocean Elijah had only heard about in stories, searched his face for something, understanding, perhaps, or permission to acknowledge the impossible tension between them. "Neither should I," he responded, equally rooted to the spot. The rain continued its relentless assault outside, but inside, time seemed suspended, hanging between heartbeats. The drumming on the roof created a rhythm that matched their racing pulses, nature providing the soundtrack to their dangerous encounter. But what Elijah didn't know was that their connection would stir a tempest that neither of them could control. As another flash of lightning illuminated their faces, a shadow passed by the small window. Someone else was out in the storm, moving across the plantation grounds. The silhouette was brief but unmistakable, a reminder that their world extended beyond the walls of this temporary sanctuary. The danger of discovery loomed larger with every passing second, yet neither could break the spell that had been cast in this unlikely sanctuary. Clara's breath caught in her throat, her eyes darting to the window, then back to Elijah's face. Fear and something deeper battling for dominance. "If they find us," she began, but couldn't finish the thought. The consequences were too terrible to voice aloud. For her, scandal and ruin. For him, torture and likely death. The plantation had witnessed such punishments before, public spectacles designed to reinforce the unforgiving hierarchy that governed their lives. Elijah moved slightly, positioning himself to block her from view of the window. The protective gesture wasn't lost on Clara, whose eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. "Tell me about your dreams," she said suddenly, desperately changing the subject as if normal conversation could somehow normalize their situation. "Not the nightmares that haunt you, but the dreams that sustain you." The question was intimate, more personal than any physical touch could be. It asked him to reveal not his body but his soul, the private hopes he guarded more fiercely than any possession. Elijah hesitated, weighing the risk of truth against the safety of silence. The storm seemed to hold its breath with him, a momentary lull in the downpour. "I dream of a place where my name is my own," he finally said, his voice low but steady. where I work for myself, where the fruits of my labor belong to me and my family. I dream of land, not vast like this plantation, but enough to grow food, to build a home." As he spoke, the vision became more vivid, more tangible than it had ever been when confined to his thoughts. "I dream of my children learning to read without fear, of my wife aging beside me without the threat of being sold away." The admission felt like removing a heavy stone from his chest, painful yet liberating. Clara listened, transfixed, her own sheltered existence thrown into sharp relief by his words. Her education, her books, her leisure, all things she had taken for granted revealed themselves as luxuries built upon the stolen dreams of others. "I've never," she started, then stopped, ashamed of her own ignorance, her complicity in a system she had never chosen, but had benefited from nonetheless. "I've never truly considered what it must be like." The admission cost her, he could see that, the first crack in the foundation of her understanding of the world. And as their eyes met once more, both knew that whatever happened next would change the course of their lives forever. The storm had brought them together, but what would happen when the skies cleared? Would this connection, forged in the unlikely crucible of the smokehouse, withstand the harsh light of day and the rigid structures that kept them apart? The question hung between them, unanswered but impossible to ignore. "Sometimes," Clara whispered, moving closer still, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath, "I think the greatest storm isn't out there at all." Her eyes dropped to his lips for just a moment, then back to his eyes, the implication clear and terrifying in its possibility. "It's in here, in what we dare not say, in what we force ourselves not to feel." The smokehouse suddenly seemed impossibly small, the air charged with electricity more powerful than the lightning outside. Elijah knew he stood at a precipice, that his next action could send him plummeting toward either salvation or destruction. His hand, seemingly of its own accord, rose toward her face, hovering just inches from her cheek, trembling with the magnitude of what such a touch would mean. The storm had only just begun, and neither of them knew if they would weather it or be swept away in its fury. The air inside the smokehouse was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable energy that crackled like the thunder outside. Clara's heart raced as Elijah's hand trembled near her face, a silent question hanging between them. Could they cross the invisible line that separated their worlds? The storm outside raged on, but within this wooden sanctuary, time seemed to momentarily stand still. The sound of rain drumming against the roof created a rhythmic backdrop, and each drop felt like a heartbeat, echoing the urgency of their situation. "What if someone sees us?" Clara whispered, her voice barely escaping her lips, laden with urgency and fear. She instinctively stepped back, her heart torn between desire and caution. The very act of stepping back felt like a betrayal of the connection they had forged in this fleeting moment, but the reality of their circumstances loomed heavily over them, pressing down like the oppressive humidity in the air. "Let them see," Elijah replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside him. "Let them see what it means to be human." His words echoed in the small space, resonating with a truth that felt both liberating and terrifying. He knew the risks, but the thought of turning away from this moment, from Clara, felt like a betrayal of everything he longed for. The flickering light from the lanterns cast shadows on the walls, dancing like the ghosts of their ancestors, whispering tales of resistance and hope. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of the unspoken. "If we're found—" Her words faltered, the dreadful consequences of discovery hanging in the air like a blade poised to fall. Her mind raced with images of the overseer's whip, of the punishment that could await them. Would they be separated forever? Would they pay for this moment with their lives? "I do understand," he said, stepping forward, closing the distance that had formed between them. Rainwater dripped from his clothes, pooling at his feet as he stood before her, resolute. But I also understand that this moment is ours, and I refuse to let fear take it from us." The fire in his eyes matched the storm outside, a fierce determination that ignited something within Clara that she had long suppressed. As the rain lashed against the roof, a loud crack of thunder seemed to punctuate his declaration, urging her to consider the unthinkable, to embrace the freedom of this stolen moment. "What if we could change everything?" Clara asked, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. "What if we could fight against the storm?" The question hung in the air, filled with possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. She had never considered a life beyond the confines of her gilded cage, yet here, in the presence of a man who dared to dream, those possibilities began to take shape. The thought of fighting back against the oppressive forces that sought to control them filled her with a mix of exhilaration and dread. "Then let's not waste this chance," Elijah urged, his voice low and urgent. "Let's seize it before it's too late." The intensity in his gaze held her captive, and Clara felt a surge of rebellion, a desire to step outside the roles that had been forced upon them by society, to claim a moment that was truly theirs. Each heartbeat seemed to synchronize with the storm outside, a reminder that time was fleeting and precious. But just as she reached for him, the door to the smokehouse creaked ominously, interrupting their fragile connection. Both of them froze, hearts racing as a shadow loomed in the doorway. Clara's breath caught in her throat, her instinct to retreat clashing with the desire to stand her ground. The figure was unmistakable. Samuel, the overseer, his silhouette framed by the relentless rain pouring down outside. His presence shifted the air in the room, filling it with an impending sense of danger. "What are you doing in here?" he demanded, his voice a low growl that sent a chill down Clara's spine. The authority in his tone was palpable, a reminder of the strict hierarchies that governed their lives. The moment was shattered, and Clara felt the weight of reality crash down upon her like a tidal wave. Suddenly, the smokehouse, which had felt like a sanctuary, now resembled a trap. "I was just seeking shelter from the storm," Elijah replied, his voice steady but laced with tension. He instinctively stepped in front of Clara, a barrier against the threat that Samuel represented. The tension in the room thickened, a powder keg ready to ignite. Clara's heart raced as she sensed the danger escalating, the stakes rising higher than ever before. "Shelter?" Samuel echoed, stepping further inside, the rain dripping from his hat and pooling on the floor. "This isn't a place for you, Elijah. You know your place." The words dripped with contempt, a reminder of the power, dynamics that kept them all confined. The flickering lantern light cast ominous shadows on Samuel's face, making him appear even more menacing as he surveyed the two of them. "I know my place," Elijah replied, his voice rising slightly, a hint of defiance creeping in. "But that doesn't mean I have to accept it." The defiance in his tone was unmistakable, a spark of rebellion that Clara had never witnessed before. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but in that moment she felt a thrill at his courage, a longing to join him in defying the chains that bound them. "You're playing a dangerous game, boy," Samuel warned, stepping closer, his presence imposing. The threat in his voice was clear, and Clara felt the heat of fear creeping back into her heart. "You think you can just waltz in here and—" Before Samuel could finish, a loud crash of thunder interrupted him, shaking the very walls of the smokehouse. In that split second of distraction, Clara seized the opportunity. "Leave him alone, Samuel," she yelled, the words spilling from her lips before she could stop them. The defiance in her voice shocked even her, but something within her had snapped. The injustice of their lives, the weight of oppression, all coalescing into a moment of fierce rebellion. Samuel's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment the tension in the room hung suspended in the air. "You dare speak to me like that?" he growled, taking a step toward her, but Elijah quickly interjected, stepping protectively in front of Clara once more. "You will not threaten her," he stated firmly, his voice a low rumble that resonated with conviction. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming surge of protective instinct. He would not let Samuel harm Clara, not now, not ever. The air was thick with tension, a clash of wills creating an atmosphere so charged it felt like the very storm outside had descended upon them. "This is none of your concern, Elijah," Samuel spat, his eyes flashing with anger. "You are nothing but a tool for the Master's use. Remember your place, or you'll find out just how cruel this world can be." The threat hung heavily in the air, a reminder of the consequences they faced. But Elijah held his ground, refusing to back down. "I am more than what you say I am," he replied, his voice rising with each word. "I am a man, and I will not let you demean me or her any longer." Clara watched, her heart racing as the tension between the two men escalated. She had never seen Elijah so fierce, so unyielding, and it filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't dared to entertain before. Perhaps they could stand against the storm together. Perhaps their defiance could change the course of their fates. But before things could escalate further, another crash of thunder shook the smokehouse and a flash of lightning illuminated the men's faces. Samuel, momentarily startled, stepped back, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "You think this is a game?" he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "You'll pay for this insolence, both of you." With that, he turned sharply and stormed out of the smokehouse, leaving Clara and Elijah in stunned silence. The door slammed shut behind him, echoing like the finality of a death knell. Clara's heart raced, the adrenaline of the confrontation coursing through her veins. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back now. The storm, both outside and within, had reached a boiling point. "What have we done?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief and fear. The weight of their actions settled heavily around them, a reminder that they had dared to defy the very fabric of their reality. She felt a whirlwind of emotions: fear, exhilaration, dread, each vying for dominance as she processed the confrontation. "We've taken the first step toward freedom," Elijah replied, a fire igniting in his eyes. "We've shown him that we refuse to be oppressed, that we will not be silenced." His words were like a balm, soothing the fear that had begun to creep in, igniting a flicker of hope deep within Clara's chest. For the first time, she felt like there was a path forward, a way to confront the injustices that had dictated her life. Clara nodded, determination flooding her veins. "You're right," she said, her voice steadying as resolve took root. "We can't let fear control us anymore. We have to fight for our freedom, for each other." The words felt like a promise, solid and real, binding them together in a shared commitment to defy the chains that bound them. Elijah stepped closer, his expression softening as he looked at her. "Together, we can face whatever comes next." The sincerity in his gaze melted away some of her fears, replacing them with a burgeoning sense of courage. In that moment, she understood the power of unity, the ability to stand together against the storms of life, both literal and metaphorical. As they stood there, united by their shared resolve, the storm outside began to subside, the rain easing to a gentle patter against the roof. It felt like a sign, a promise that even in the darkest of times, hope could still bloom. In that quiet moment, Clara knew that they had crossed a threshold, and though the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, they would face it together, unyielding and free. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, her voice filled with anticipation and determination. "How do we begin to fight back?" The question hung in the air, filled with the weight of their shared dreams and the challenges they would face. There was so much at stake, yet the potential for change shimmered just beyond their grasp, like a distant star illuminating the night sky. "We gather allies," Elijah replied, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to find others who feel the same way, others who are willing to stand against the injustices we face. There are whispers of those who have escaped, who are willing to help others find their way to freedom. We need to connect with them." His voice brimmed with urgency and determination, igniting a flame of hope within Clara. "And what about Samuel?" Clara asked, concern etching her brow. "He won't let this go. He will come after us." The thought of facing Samuel again filled her with dread. She could already envision the consequences of their defiance: punishments, separation, and perhaps even death. The stakes had never felt higher. "We'll be ready for him," Elijah assured her, his voice resolute. "We need to be smart about this. We'll find a way to gather information, to understand how he operates. Knowledge is power, and if we can outsmart him, we can protect ourselves." As he spoke, Clara could see the gears turning in his mind, his determination infectious. It kindled a fire within her, igniting a sense of purpose that she had never felt before. "I want to help," she said, her voice firm. "I want to be part of this fight, to stand beside you." The decision felt monumental, a turning point in her life. No longer would she be a passive participant in her own story. She would take an active role in shaping her destiny. "Then we'll do this together," Elijah replied, a smile breaking through the tension etched on his face. "We'll find a way to change our fates, to fight for our freedom. Together, we are stronger." The promise in his words resonated deep within her, echoing through the very core of her being. She felt an exhilarating rush at the thought of standing together against the forces that sought to keep them apart. As they stood in the smokehouse, the storm finally beginning to fade, Clara felt a sense of clarity wash over her. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and potential heartache, but she was willing to face it all as long as Elijah was by her side. They were no longer just a slave and the master's wife. They were allies united by a shared dream of freedom, ready to challenge the oppressive forces that sought to keep them apart. And so, as the storm began to abate, they took their first steps into the unknown, ready to challenge the world that had sought to keep them apart. The real battle for their freedom had just begun, and together they would forge a new destiny, one where love and bravery could conquer even the fiercest of storms. The next few days passed in a haze of urgency and determination. Clara and Elijah worked swiftly, their minds racing with plans and possibilities. Each stolen moment together felt like a precious gift, a brief respite from the weight of their reality. They met in the smokehouse, their secret sanctuary, where they could speak freely, map out their strategies, and share their dreams of freedom without fear of being overheard. The scent of smoked meats and herbs lingered in the air, a reminder of the life they were, desperate to escape, but also a symbol of the community they had built in this clandestine space. Clara found herself invigorated by the thrill of their clandestine meetings. Each time Elijah walked through the door, drenched from the rain or dusty from the fields, her heart would leap at the sight of him. His presence filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. They shared whispered conversations, their voices barely above the sound of the rain pattering against the roof, and every word exchanged felt like a promise of what was to come. Time spent together became a balm for the fears that haunted them, a sanctuary where they could dream of a life unburdened by the chains of oppression. "We need to find others who feel the same way we do," Elijah insisted one afternoon, his brow furrowed in concentration. They sat on crates piled high with cured meats, the warmth of their bodies creating a small pocket of comfort amidst the chill of the evening air. "I've heard whispers in the quarters about a group that's planning an escape. They call themselves the Freedom Seekers." Clara leaned closer, her heart racing at the prospect of finding allies. "What do we know about them?" she asked, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Do they have a leader? Are they trustworthy?" The thought of seeking help from others filled her with both hope and fear. What if they were discovered? "I've heard that a woman named Mary leads them," Elijah replied, his eyes bright with determination. "She's known for her bravery and resourcefulness. If anyone can help us, it's her." He paused, gauging Clara's reaction. "But we need to be careful. If Samuel catches wind of what we're planning, it could put us all in danger." Clara nodded, her pulse quickening at the thought. "We can't let that happen. We'll have to be discreet. We can use the cover of the storm to mask our movements." The rain had become a constant companion, a reminder of the chaos that surrounded them and the urgency of their mission. Every time the thunder rumbled, a sense of purpose washed over her, fueling her resolve. The storm mirrored their internal struggles, a tempest that threatened to engulf them but also provided the perfect cover for their plans. With a plan taking shape, they turned their attention to gathering information. Clara began engaging in casual conversations with the other house slaves, carefully probing for any hints of the freedom seekers. She learned to blend in, adopting the false facade of a dutiful mistress while her heart raced with the thrill of her secret agenda. Meanwhile, Elijah worked the fields, his ears attuned to the whispers of those around him, seeking any mention of Mary and her group. He knew that knowledge was their greatest weapon, and every piece of information he could gather would help them navigate the treacherous waters ahead. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Each meeting in the Smokehouse was filled with laughter, shared dreams, and whispered fears. Clara found herself sharing more than just her aspirations for freedom. She revealed her childhood memories, the dreams she had tucked away, and the longing for a life unfettered by the constraints of her current existence. Elijah listened intently, his gaze never leaving hers, and in those moments she felt truly seen for the first time in her life. The connection they forged in the Smokehouse was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a bond built on trust, shared experiences, and the courage to dream of a better future. "Do you remember the stories your mother told you?" he asked one evening as they sat amidst the flickering shadows cast by the lanterns. "The ones about heroes and freedom?" Clara smiled, recalling the warmth of her mother's voice as she spun tales of brave souls who had fought for their liberty. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft. "She always said that freedom was worth fighting for, that it was the most precious gift one could ever possess." "Then we must fight for it," Elijah said, his voice filled with conviction. "Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has ever been silenced, for those who have come before us and those who will come after." His passion ignited something within Clara, a flame that pushed her to dream bigger, to envision a world where they could be free together. The thought of a future where they could live without fear became a guiding light, illuminating the path they were determined to follow. But the dark clouds of danger loomed overhead, casting a shadow over their burgeoning plans. Clara and Elijah knew they must act quickly. As they made plans to meet with Mary and her group, Clara felt a mixture of excitement and fear gnawing at her stomach. The stakes were higher now than ever before. They were no longer just two souls yearning for freedom. They were part of a larger movement, a fight against the oppressive forces that sought to keep them in chains. "We'll meet under the old oak tree by the river at midnight," Elijah instructed one night, his voice low and serious. "It's secluded, and we can speak freely without the risk of being overheard. If we're caught, the consequences could be dire." "What if someone follows us?" Clara asked, her heart racing at the thought of being discovered. "What if Samuel finds out?" The fear of retribution loomed large in her mind, images of Samuel's wrath flashing before her eyes. She could already envision the punishments, the violent repercussions that could follow if they were caught. "We'll have to be careful. We can't let fear control us. We'll move under the cover of darkness and stick to the shadows. If we're cautious, we can make it." Elijah's eyes shone with determination, and Clara felt a surge of bravery in his presence. She had never felt so alive, so empowered, and she knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As the night of their meeting approached, Clara found it hard to focus on anything else. The air was thick with tension and anticipation, and every rustle of leaves seemed to echo with the weight of their mission. She spent her days avoiding the scrutinizing gaze of her husband and the overseer, her heart pounding with the knowledge of what lay ahead. The old oak tree had become a symbol of hope, a beacon of the freedom they sought, and the thought of gathering there filled her with both excitement and trepidation. Finally, as the moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the landscape, Clara prepared to leave the confines of her home. She donned a simple cloak, hoping to blend in with the shadows, and made her way to the smokehouse where Elijah awaited her. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air crisp and cool, a welcome change from the oppressive heat of the past few weeks. The world felt alive beneath the moonlight, each sound amplified in the stillness of the night. "Are you ready?" Elijah asked when she arrived, his expression a mix of excitement and concern. The flicker of the lantern illuminated his face, casting shadows that danced across his features. Clara could see the determination etched in his brow, the fire of rebellion that burned brightly in his eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Let's do this." With a shared nod, they stepped into the night, united in purpose and resolve. Together they slipped out of the smokehouse and into the darkness, moving quietly through the plantation grounds. The moonlight guided their steps as they navigated the familiar paths, their hearts racing with each sound that broke the stillness of the night. The world felt alive around them, a cacophony of whispers and rustling leaves, but they pressed on, driven by their shared purpose. As they approached the old oak tree, Clara's heart raced with anticipation. The tree loomed large against the night sky, its gnarled branches reaching out like arms welcoming them into its embrace. Beneath its sprawling canopy they spotted figures gathered in hushed conversation. Clara's breath caught in her throat. These were the freedom seekers, the allies they had longed for. Mary stood at the center of the group, her presence commanding and fierce. Clara recognized her from the whispers among the quarters. She was a force to be reckoned with. As Clara and Elijah stepped forward, Mary turned, her sharp gaze assessing them. The flickering firelight danced in her eyes, revealing a spirit that had weathered many storms. "You must be the ones I've heard about," Mary said, her voice steady and confident. "The ones who want to fight back." Her tone was both inviting and serious, a reminder that joining this movement was no small matter. "We are," Elijah replied, his voice strong. "We want to join you, to help in any way we can." His words were earnest, filled with the weight of their shared struggle. Clara felt a surge of pride as she stood beside him, ready to take her place in this fight for freedom. Mary studied them for a moment, her expression unreadable. "This is not a game," she warned, her tone serious. "The road we walk is fraught with danger. Are you prepared for what lies ahead?" The gravity of her words hung in the air, and Clara felt the weight of the responsibility pressing down upon her. "We are," Clara said, her voice unwavering. "We are ready to fight for our freedom." The words felt powerful as they left her lips, a declaration of her commitment to the cause. She could feel the fire of determination igniting within her, a promise to stand firm against the oppressive forces that sought to keep them bound. Mary nodded, a hint of respect in her eyes. "Then welcome. We need all the brave souls we can muster. The time for change is now." The urgency in her voice resonated with Clara, amplifying the resolve that had taken root within her heart. As the group gathered closer, Clara felt a surge of hope swell within her. She was no longer alone. She was part of something greater, a movement forged in the fires of rebellion. Together they would challenge the storm that loomed on the horizon, ready to fight for the freedom they all so desperately desired. She glanced around at the faces surrounding her, each one a testament to the strength, resilience, and unwavering spirit of those who had faced unimaginable hardships, yet still dared to dream of a better life. In that moment beneath the old oak tree, Clara knew that they were on the precipice of something monumental. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with allies by their side, they would stand strong against the tempest, ready to carve out a future where freedom was not just a dream, but a reality. As the group began to share their stories, Clara listened intently, absorbing the experiences and struggles of those around her. Each tale of hardship and resilience reinforced her belief in the strength of their collective spirit. She realized that their fight was not just for their own liberation, but for the countless souls who had suffered before them, those who had been silenced and forgotten. The gravity of their mission weighed heavily on her shoulders, but it also filled her with an overwhelming sense of purpose. "We have a plan," Mary said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "We need to coordinate our movements, gather supplies, and set a date for the escape. The more prepared we are, the better our chances of success." Her eyes scanned the group, searching for those willing to step forward and contribute. "We will need food, water, and clothing to disguise ourselves as we make our way to the north." "I can help with that," Clara spoke up, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "I can gather supplies from the kitchen and the house. I have access that others don't." The words spilled from her mouth before she could second-guess herself, fueled by the urgency of the moment. "That's a good start," Mary replied, a nod of approval crossing her face. "We will need all hands on deck. Elijah, can you scout the area and keep an ear out for any word from Samuel? We can't afford to be caught off guard." "I'll keep my eyes open," Elijah said, determination etched into his features. "I'll listen for any whispers about our plans and report back. We need to stay one step ahead." The camaraderie that began to form among the group ignited a fire in Clara's heart, a sense of belonging that she had never felt before. They were no longer isolated individuals, they were a united front, ready to fight for their freedom together. As the discussions continued, the night deepened around them, the stars twinkling above like distant beacons of hope. The weight of their mission began to settle into a sense of purpose, a shared understanding that they were embarking on a journey that would change the course of their lives forever. Clara felt a surge of energy, a fierce desire to reclaim their futures and forge a new path filled with possibility. "Remember," Mary said, her voice rising above the hum of conversation, "we will face many dangers, but we must remain vigilant, trust in each other, and stay united. Together, we are stronger than any chain that seeks to bind us." The words resonated deeply, and Clara felt a newfound strength flow through her veins. They were not alone. They had each other, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. With their plans taking shape and their resolve solidified, Clara knew that they were on the cusp of something transformative. The gathering storm that had threatened to consume them was now a catalyst for change, a force that would propel them toward their shared dream of freedom. The night was still young, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time in a long time, Clara felt a glimmer of hope illuminating the darkness. And so, as the wind whispered through the leaves and the stars twinkled overhead, they began to share their stories, their hopes, and their plans, united in their quest for liberation. The gathering storm had transformed into a rallying cry, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead with unwavering resolve, ready to reclaim their lives and their destinies. As the days turned into a blur of preparation and anticipation, Clara and Elijah immersed themselves in the fight for freedom. They met regularly with Mary and the other members of the Freedom Seekers, pooling their resources and knowledge to craft a plan that would give them the best chance of success. Each gathering beneath the old oak tree was charged with a sense of urgency and purpose, their shared dreams hanging in the air like the fragrant blossoms of spring, ready to bloom. Clara quickly learned how to navigate the intricacies of their operation. Under Mary's guidance, she became adept at gathering supplies from the kitchen, stolen bits of bread, jars of pickled vegetables, and whatever else she could sneak away without raising suspicion. Each time she returned to the smokehouse with a bounty, she felt a rush of exhilaration. It was as if with each small act of defiance she was reclaiming a piece of herself, a part that had long been dormant under the weight of expectation and fear. Elijah, too, worked tirelessly to gather information. He moved through the fields with a practiced ease, blending in with the other workers, listening for any gossip that might indicate Samuel's movements or plans. He took note of the guards' routines, the times when they were most distracted, and any changes in the overseer's demeanor. His keen awareness and strategic thinking impressed Mary, and he quickly earned the respect of the group. "You have a natural talent for this," Mary would tell him, her voice full of admiration. "Your ability to blend in is a skill that many lack. You're a valuable asset to our cause." Elijah would smile at her praise, but Clara could see the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was not just fighting for his freedom, but for hers and for the futures of everyone in their circle. As they worked together, Clara and Elijah's bond deepened. The moments they spent planning and strategizing were interspersed with laughter and shared stories, allowing them to forget, if only for a moment, the gravity of their situation. They talked about their hopes and dreams, the lives they wanted to build once they were free. Clara spoke of a small farm, a place where she could grow her own vegetables and raise animals, a sanctuary where she could finally breathe without fear. Elijah shared his dreams of traveling beyond the borders of the plantation, of seeing the world and experiencing the beauty of freedom. "Imagine waking up every day knowing we're free," Clara would say, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We could go wherever we wanted, do whatever we wanted." "And we will," Elijah would reply, his voice filled with determination. "It's just a matter of time." The conviction in his words fortified Clara's hope, and each shared dream felt like a promise they would fulfill together. However, the reality of their situation loomed heavily over their heads, like a gathering storm. Clara's heart raced with anxiety as the date for their escape approached. Despite their preparations, every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind, felt like a warning. She found herself constantly scanning the horizon, half expecting to see Samuel's figure appear, ready to shatter their plans. On the night of their planned escape, the air was thick with tension. Clara donned her cloak, the fabric heavy against her skin, and made her way to the smokehouse, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She found Elijah waiting for her, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and steady. There was a fire in his eyes, a resolute determination that steadied her nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do this." They slipped out of the smokehouse and into the night, the moonlight guiding their steps as they navigated the darkened paths of the plantation. The world felt alive around them, every sound amplified in the stillness of the night. As they approached the old oak tree, Clara's heart raced with anticipation. This tree had become a symbol of their hope, a meeting place where dreams of freedom had taken root. When they arrived, the freedom seekers were already gathered, their faces tense with a mixture of excitement and fear. Mary stood at the center, her presence commanding as she addressed the group. "Tonight is the night," she said, her voice steady. "We've prepared for this moment, and now we must act. Remember what we discussed. Stick to the plan, move quietly, and trust one another. Our freedom is within reach, but we must be vigilant." Clara could feel the energy in the air, a palpable mix of hope and anxiety. She looked around the group, recognizing familiar faces, men and women who had shared their stories, their dreams, and their fears. They were united by a common purpose, and in that moment Clara felt a surge of courage. If they could stand together against the darkness, they could overcome anything. "We'll head for the river first," Mary instructed. "The water will mask our sounds, and we can use the cover of the trees to stay hidden. Once we reach the other side, we'll make our way north." As the group began to move, Clara felt Elijah's hand find hers, their fingers intertwining. The warmth of his grip steadied her, and together they slipped into the shadows, moving silently through the underbrush. The night was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant croaking of frogs, and the soft lapping of water against the shore. Each step felt like a step closer to freedom, yet the weight of the world pressed down upon them, a reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond their reach. As they approached the river, Clara's heart raced. The water glimmered in the moonlight, a silver ribbon cutting through the darkness. It was both a barrier and a pathway, a way to escape the chains that bound them. They moved cautiously along the bank, the cool breeze brushing against their skin, heightening their senses. Clara could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a mix of fear and exhilaration propelling her forward. "Stay close," Elijah whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of the water. "We can't afford to get separated." Clara nodded, her grip on his hand tightening as they navigated the rocky terrain. The rush of the river masked their footsteps, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine what lay beyond the water, a world where they could be free, where they could build the lives they had always dreamed of. But as they reached the water's edge, Clara's heart sank at the sight before them. The river was wider than she had anticipated, the current flowing swiftly, a testament to the power of nature. "We'll have to swim," Mary said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in the air. "Stay together and follow my lead." The group exchanged anxious glances, the reality of their situation settling in. Clara's heart raced as she looked at the dark waters, the unknown depths swirling beneath the surface. "Can we make it?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "What if one of us gets swept away?" "We have to try," Elijah replied, his eyes filled with determination. "We can't turn back now." With a deep breath, Clara nodded, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. Together, they stepped into the water, the chill shocking her system as she waded deeper. The current tugged at her legs, but she focused on Elijah's presence beside her, the strength of his grip anchoring her in the chaotic waters. "Keep swimming. Don't stop," Mary shouted as they pushed off from the shore, their bodies moving in unison against the current. Clara fought against the water, her arms flailing as she focused on reaching the other side. The fear of being swept away was overwhelming, but the thought of freedom spurred her on. With every stroke, Clara felt the weight of her fears begin to dissipate. She was no longer just a slave. She was a fighter, a warrior for her own freedom and the freedom of those she cared for. The water roared around her, but she pressed forward, driven by the promise of liberation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the opposite shore, gasping for breath as they pulled themselves onto the bank. Clara collapsed onto the grass, her heart racing, the cool earth grounding her as she took in the reality of their escape. They had made it across the river, but the night was far from over. "We need to move quickly," Mary urged, her voice filled with urgency. "We can't linger here for long." As they gathered themselves, Clara felt a surge of hope wash over her. They had faced the river and emerged victorious. They had taken their first steps into freedom. Together with Elijah and the other freedom seekers, she felt an unbreakable bond form between them, a collective determination that would carry them forward into the unknown. "Let's go," Elijah said, his voice steady as he helped Clara to her feet. They fell into step with the group, moving through the dense brush, the moonlight casting a silvery glow on their path. Each step felt lighter, each breath a reminder of the choices they had made and the lives they were reclaiming. As they traversed the woods, Clara could hear the distant sounds of the plantation fading behind them, the place that had once held them captive now becoming a distant memory. With each stride, she felt the weight of her past lift, a burden shed as they ventured deeper into the night, toward a future filled with possibility. But as they pressed on, the sound of voices drifted through the trees, sending a jolt of fear through the group. "We need to hide," Mary hissed, her eyes scanning the surroundings for a place to take cover. Clara's heart raced as she ducked behind a thick cluster of bushes, her breathing shallow as she listened intently. "What was that?" a voice called out in the distance, the sound of footsteps crunching through the underbrush. Clara felt her stomach drop. They were not alone. The guards had discovered their absence and were searching for them. Adrenaline surged through her body as she glanced at Elijah. Fear etched on his face, but there was also a fierce determination in his eyes. "We can't let them find us," Elijah whispered urgently, his hand gripping hers tightly. "Stay low and move quietly." Clara nodded, her heart pounding in her chest as they crouched low, blending into the shadows. The voices grew louder, the guards drawing closer, and Clara could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She held her breath, praying they would pass without discovering them. "They couldn't have gotten far," one guard said, his tone filled with frustration. "Search the area thoroughly. We can't let them escape." "We'll find them," another replied, his voice filled with menace. "They won't get away from us." As the guards moved past their hiding spot, Clara felt a wave of panic wash over her. Would they be caught? Would all their planning and sacrifices be in vain? The fear of returning to the plantation, of being punished for their rebellion, sent chills down her spine. But in that moment, with Elijah by her side and the freedom seekers surrounding her, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. They had come too far to turn back now. This was their chance at freedom, and Clara was determined to fight for it, no matter the cost. As the guards continued their search, Clara felt the weight of her past begin to lift, replaced by an unyielding resolve to forge a new path forward. They would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, united in their quest for liberation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the guards moved on, their voices fading into the distance. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her heart still racing as she looked at Elijah, who was watching her with a mix of concern and pride. "We need to keep moving," Mary urged, her voice steady despite the danger they had just faced. "We can't let them catch us." With that, they resumed their journey through the woods, every step a testament to their courage and determination. Clara felt the weight of their shared struggle bind them together, a promise that they would fight for their freedom, no matter the cost. They were no longer just individuals seeking escape. They were a united force, ready to challenge the storm that lay ahead and carve out a future where they could live freely, on their own terms. And as the moon hung high in the sky, illuminating their path, Clara knew that they were on the brink of something extraordinary, a journey that would change their lives forever, and a fight that would echo through the ages, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to dream of freedom.